The sky above Prime had always been gentle. Soft purple clouds moved slowly across the horizon. 3 small moons hung in the distance like pearls. For 300 years, the people had lived under this peaceful sky. They built beautiful cities made of crystal and light. They wrote poetry. They created music that could make other species cry with joy. They had never known war. They were not built for fighting. Their bodies were thin and delicate. Their skin was almost see-through, showing the soft blue glow of their blood beneath. Their eyes were large and sensitive, made for reading ancient texts and watching stars, not for battle. They stood only 4 feet tall. A strong wind could knock them down. Grandmother was the oldest living. She had seen 112 summers. Her skin had turned from pale blue to silver with age. She spent her days in the great archive, studying the knowledge left behind by civilizations that had risen and fallen long before her people existed. She believed that understanding the past was the key to a peaceful future. She was wrong about the future. The first warning came at dawn. A young astronomer named Little ran into the archive with terror in her eyes. She could barely speak. She pointed at the sky and made a sound that had never heard any make before. It was the sound of pure fear. Walked outside and looked up. The sky was filled with ships, hundreds of them. They were black and ugly, covered in sharp edges and weapons. They blocked out the morning sun and cast a shadow over the entire city. They had never built weapons. They had never needed to, but had read about species that lived only to hurt others. She had read about There were raiders. They traveled from system to system, taking whatever they wanted. They were large creatures with thick gray skin and 4 arms. Their mouths were filled with rows of sharp teeth. They did not build. They did not create. They only destroyed and enslaved. Across 12 star systems, their name was spoken in whispers. When they came to your world, you had 2 choices. You could become their slave or you could die. Within hours, the landing ships touched down outside every major city. They had no army to send against them. They had no weapons to fight with. Some tried to hide. Some tried to run. It did not matter. They moved through the streets like a flood of darkness. Watch from the archive window as soldiers dragged families from their homes. They separated the young from the old. The young and healthy were put in chains and loaded onto transport ships. They would be sold in slave markets across the galaxy. The old and the sick were not so lucky. They had no use for those who could not work. Heard the sounds of violence. She heard screaming. She heard silence. She felt something she had never felt before. It was anger, deep, burning anger. But anger alone could not save her people. She needed help. She needed a miracle. Deep beneath the archive, there was a chamber that no one had entered for 500 years. His grandmother had told her about it when she was young. Long ago, before they existed, another civilization had lived in this part of the galaxy. They were called the Builders, and they had created a network of relay stations that could send messages across impossible distances. One of those stations was hidden beneath the city. She moved through the dark tunnels as fast as her old body could carry her. Above her, she heard explosions. They were destroying the beautiful crystal towers that her ancestors had spent centuries building. Tears ran down her silver face, but she did not stop. The relay station was covered in dust and age. The controls were strange, built for hands very different from her own, but was a scholar. She had spent her entire life learning how to understand things that others could not. She worked through the night, connecting power sources and activating systems that had been sleeping for thousands of years. Finally, a screen flickered to life. She did not know who would hear her message. She did not know if anyone would care. The galaxy was full of species who looked away when others suffered. They were afraid of They did not want to become targets themselves. Understood this. Fear was a powerful thing. But she had to try. She pressed her thin hand against the transmission panel and spoke into the ancient machine. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "This is Prime. We are under attack. They have come. They are taking our children, they are killing our elders, we have no weapons, we have no army. We cannot defend ourselves, please, if anyone can hear this message. If anyone has the power to help, we are begging you. Our children are dying, please, anyone help us. She sent the message in every language stored in the archive's database. She sent it in every direction the relay station could reach. Then she sat down on the cold floor and waited. The message traveled outward at speeds that no ship could match. It passed through empty space and dead systems. It reached colonies and stations and worlds of every kind. Many species heard the signal. Most of them turned away. They were too dangerous. Getting involved meant war. It was sad, they told themselves, but it was not their problem. But the signal did not stop. It kept traveling outward, toward the edge of the galaxy, toward a small yellow star that no one in the galactic community paid much attention to. The species that lived there was young. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were still learning their place in the universe. The signal reached the third planet from that yellow star, a blue and green world covered in water and clouds, a world where the gravity was crushing, where the weather was violent, where the creatures had evolved by fighting and surviving against everything that tried to kill them. The signal reached Earth, and Earth listened. In an observation post on the edge of human space, a young communications officer named Private sat up straight in her chair. She had been half asleep, bored by another quiet night shift. Now she was wide awake. She played the message 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. Then she picked up her communicator and called her commanding officer. "Sir," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "you need to hear this." Captain Park stood on the bridge of the UESS Indomitable and stared at the message on his screen. He had read it 7 times now. Each time he felt the same cold weight in his stomach. He was 53 years old. He had served in the United Earth Systems Navy for 30 years. He had seen many things in his career. He had seen battles and death and the empty shells of worlds that had been stripped clean by raiders. He knew what was happening on Prime. Behind him, his crew worked in silence. They had all heard the message. They were waiting to see what their captain would do. Lieutenant stepped forward. She was his second in command, a sharp woman in her late 30s with short black hair and serious eyes. She had served with for 8 years. She knew him better than most. "Sir," she said quietly, "Command has already responded to the signal. They say Prime is not in our patrol sector. They say intervention would require approval from the Council. They say—" "I know what they say," interrupted. His voice was calm, but there was something hard underneath it. Continued carefully. "It would take at least 2 weeks to get Council approval. By then, everyone on that planet will be dead or in chains." Turned to look at her. "I have 3 children back on Earth, a daughter who just turned 12. When I close my eyes, I can hear that message. I can hear that woman begging someone to save her people's children." Said nothing, she understood. Looked around the bridge at his crew. Young faces, old faces, all of them watching him, all of them waiting. "Navigation," he said. "How long to reach Prime at maximum burn?" Lieutenant Shin, a young man barely out of the academy, checked his console. 18 days, sir." Nodded slowly, set a course. The bridge went completely silent. Stepped closer. "Sir, if we do this without authorization, Command will court-martial me, strip my rank, lock me in a cell." Smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I know, but I also know that I could not live with myself if I sat here and did nothing while children were sold into slavery." He looked at his crew again. "I will not order any of you to come with me. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship before we leave, I will arrange it. No questions asked. No judgment." No one moved. Private, the young communications officer who had first received the signal, spoke up from her station. "Sir, with respect, we all heard that message. I think I speak for everyone when I say we are with you." A murmur of agreement went through the bridge. Felt a warmth in his chest that he had not expected. He nodded once. "Then let's move. We have a long way to go, and those people have already waited too long." The Indomitable turned away from its patrol route and pointed its nose toward distant stars. Within minutes, its engines roared to life, and the ship shot forward into the darkness. But the Indomitable did not travel alone. 6 hours later, 4 more ships broke formation and followed. The first was the destroyer Hammer of Soul. It was an older ship, but its captain, Commander No, was a veteran of 3 major conflicts. He had lost his own family to raiders when he was young. He had spent his entire life fighting to make sure that what happened to him would never happen to anyone else. When he heard where the Indomitable was going, he did not hesitate. The second ship was the medical frigate Mercy's Hand. It was not built for combat. Its hull was thin, and it carried no heavy weapons, but it had medical bays that could treat 500 patients at once. Its captain, Doctor, was a small woman with gentle hands and a core of pure steel. She believed that healing was just as important as fighting. The third ship was the carrier Eternal Dawn. It held 40 fighter craft and 200 combat pilots. Its captain, Commander, was known for his calm under pressure. He had once flown his damaged fighter into an enemy battleship's engine core to save a civilian transport. He had survived somehow. He always survived. The fourth ship was the gunship Black Tiger. It was small, fast, and built for one purpose: destruction. Its commander was Major, a woman whose name made enemy commanders nervous. She was 41 years old. She had never retreated from a fight in her life. She had scars on her face, her arms, her soul. Some said she was crazy. Others said she was simply not afraid of death. When received word that 4 ships were following him, he felt something catch in his throat. He opened a channel to all of them. "This is Captain Park. You know what we are about to do. You know the risks. You know that we might not come back. I want you all to know that I am grateful, not just as your commanding officer, but as a human being." Major's voice came back immediately, rough and direct. "Save the speeches, Captain. Just point us at the bad guys." Commander No spoke next, his voice steady. "My ship is old, but she still has teeth. We are with you until the end." Doctor's gentle voice followed. "Someone has to patch you all up after the fighting. I suppose that will be my job." Commander simply said, "My pilots are ready. Give us a target." Smiled, understood. "All ships increase to maximum speed. We have 18 days, let's use them well." As the 5 human ships raced through space toward Prime, word spread through the fleet. Other captains heard what was happening. Some called a fool, some called him a hero. Command sent angry messages demanding that he turn back. Politicians argued about the consequences of unauthorized military action, but did not turn back. He thought about the woman in the message. Grandmother. He did not know her. He had never met her, but he could hear the fear and the hope in her voice. She had believed against all evidence that someone would come, that someone in the vast and cold universe would care about her people, was going to make sure she was right. On the 15th day of travel, they picked up new signals from Prime, broken messages, screams, crying. They were still there, still taking slaves, still killing those who resisted. Time was running out. Approached in his quarters. "Sir, we are 3 days out. They have at least 30 warships in orbit around the planet. We have 5 ships." Looked up from the battle plans he had been studying. "Do you know what makes humans different from most other species in this galaxy, Lieutenant?" Shook her head. "We are from a planet where everything tries to kill you. The weather, the animals, the diseases, even the plants sometimes. We evolved by refusing to die, by being too stubborn, too angry, too determined to give up." He stood and looked out the window at the stars. "Those think they are predators. They think they are the most dangerous things in the galaxy. They have never met humans before." He turned back with a look in his eyes that she had never seen before. "They are about to learn what a real predator looks like." Grandmother had stopped counting the days. Time had become meaningless. She hid in the tunnels beneath the archive with 200 other, mostly children and elderly who could not run fast enough to escape the patrols. They lived in darkness, eating whatever scraps they could find, drinking water that dripped from the stone walls above. Every night heard the transport ships taking off. Each ship carried hundreds of her people to lives of slavery across the galaxy. She heard the screaming. She heard the crying. Then she heard silence. The silence was worse. She had sent her message 18 days ago. No one had come. Of course, no one had come. She had been foolish to hope. The galaxy was cold and cruel. Species looked after themselves. That was the way of things. That was how you survived. Little sat next to her in the darkness. The young astronomer had become shadow. Her family had been taken on the first day. She had nowhere else to go. Grandmother whispered, "Do you think anyone heard us?" Was quiet for a long moment. She did not want to lie. "I do not know, little one, I hope so, but hope is not the same as truth." Pressed closer to her. "If someone comes, will they be strong enough to fight the—" Thought about all the species she had studied in her long life. Most were like the peaceful, fragile, built for beauty, not battle. They were different. They were built for violence. It was in their blood, in their bones, in every part of their being. Who could stand against creatures like that? She did not have an answer. Above them the ground shook, looked up in fear. Had they found their hiding place? Were they coming to take the last survivors? The shaking grew stronger. It felt different from the landing ships. It was more violent, more powerful. Dust fell from the ceiling. Children began to cry. Then heard something that made her heart stop. It was a sound that came from the sky, a sound like thunder but sharper, like the roar of some massive beast. She pushed herself up on her tired legs and moved toward the tunnel entrance. She had to see. She had to know. She climbed the broken stairs and stepped outside for the first time in days. The light hurt her eyes. When her vision cleared, she looked up. And she saw them. 5 ships tore through the purple clouds like knives through silk. They were not beautiful like ships. They were not ugly like ships. They were something else entirely. They were built with a purpose that had never seen before. Every line, every angle, every weapon mount spoke of one thing: war. Not war for conquest, not war for profit, war for survival. These were the ships of a species that had learned to fight by fighting everything. The lead ship, the largest one, broadcast on every frequency at once. A voice spoke in perfect. Someone had taken the time to learn their language. "This is Captain Park of the United Earth Systems Navy. We received your distress call. We have traveled 18 days to reach you. We are here to help. Hold on. We are coming." Fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her silver face. She could not speak. She could not move. All she could do was watch as the human ships spread across the sky and began their attack on the fleet. The battle in orbit was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. They had 30 warships. The humans had 5. It should have been a quick victory for them. It was not. The human ships moved with terrifying speed and precision. They did not fight the way other species fought. They did not hang back and exchange fire from a safe distance. They pushed forward, always forward, closing the gap until their weapons could do maximum damage. The small gunship, the Black Tiger, flew directly into the center of the formation and opened fire in every direction at once. It was crazy. It was suicidal. It was working. Ships began to burn and fall from the sky. Meanwhile, smaller craft descended from the human carrier. They were landing ships, carrying soldiers to the surface. Watched them come down through the smoke and fire. They landed in the city center, in the parks, in the streets that had once been filled with families living peaceful lives. The first human soldier saw was a young woman. She was average height for a human, which meant she towered over any. She wore heavy armor and carried a weapon that looked like it weighed more than herself. Her helmet was removed, showing a face with sharp features and intelligent eyes. The soldier looked around at the destruction. Then she looked at. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. 2 species meeting for the first time. one from a gentle world of art and light, one from of storms and predators. The human soldier walked toward slowly, her weapon lowered. She stopped a few feet away and knelt down so that she was at eye level with the elderly. "My name is Lieutenant," she said in careful. "I am a translator with the Human Rescue Force. Are you the one who sent the message?" Nodded, still unable to speak. Smiled. It was a warm smile, a kind smile. It did not match the armor and weapons she wore. "You have a strong voice, grandmother. Your message traveled a very long way. We heard you. We came as fast as we could." Finally found her words. "Why? You do not know us. We have never met. We have nothing to give you. Why would you travel so far and risk so much for strangers?" Smile faded slightly. Her eyes became serious. "Where I come from, there is an old saying. When someone calls for help, you help them. You do not ask what they can give you in return. You do not ask if it is convenient. You simply help, because that is what good people do." Behind, more human soldiers were moving through the streets. They were not just fighting. They were searching through rubble. They were calling out for survivors. They were carrying children in their arms, children who had been hiding in the ruins, too afraid to come out. Little appeared at side. She stared at with wide, frightened eyes. The human was so large, so strange, so clearly built for violence, but simply knelt down again and held out her hand, palm up. "Hello, little one," she said gently. "Do not be afraid. We are here to protect you now. That will not hurt you anymore." Looked at, who nodded slowly. Then, very carefully, the young placed her tiny hand in the human's large palm, closed her fingers around it with infinite gentleness. "Come," said, "let me take you somewhere safe. There is food and medicine on our ships, and when this is over, when we have driven thee away, we will help you rebuild. I promise you." Watched as led toward the human landing craft. All around them, the sounds of battle continued. The sky was filled with fire and falling ships. Human soldiers were fighting and dying to protect a species they had never met. For the first time in 18 days, felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Not the foolish hope of a desperate message sent into the void. Real hope. The kind of hope that comes when you realize that you are not alone. The kind of hope that comes when strangers become friends, when the galaxy reveals itself to be just a little less cold than you thought. The humans had come. Against all reason, against all logic, against everything that had learned in her long life about how the universe worked, they had come. And they were just getting started. The war commander stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the battle unfold with growing confusion. This was not supposed to happen. They had raided hundreds of worlds. They had faced dozens of species. The pattern was always the same. Weak species ran. Weak species hid. Weak species surrendered and begged for mercy. These humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were attacking with a fury that had never seen before. "Commander," one of his officers reported, "we have lost 8 ships. The human gunship has destroyed 3 of them alone. Our shields cannot stop their weapons." Bared his teeth. "They are outnumbered 6 to 1. How is this possible?" No one answered him. No one had an answer. On the surface of Prime, Major led the ground assault. She had 300 soldiers under her command. They had over 2,000 on the planet. The numbers did not matter to her. Numbers never mattered to her. She moved through the occupied city like a ghost made of iron and fire. Her rifle never stopped firing. Her legs never stopped moving. The soldiers she encountered had never faced anything like her. They were used to prey that froze in fear, did not freeze. She advanced. Behind her, her soldiers followed. They had trained for years in the harshest conditions Earth could offer. They had run through deserts. They had climbed mountains. They had swam through freezing oceans. They had been broken down and built back up into something that could survive anything. Now they were putting that training to use. Squad 2 moved left and flanked that position, barked into her communicator. Squad 3, I want suppressing fire on that building. Squad 4, get those civilians out of here now. The battle was chaos but thrived in chaos. She saw patterns where others saw confusion. She found weaknesses where others saw strength. And when she found a weakness, she hit it with everything she had. Chief Warrant Officer was her demolitions expert. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke more than necessary. But when he worked, he was an artist. That night, he planted charges on 3 landing ships while their crews slept. When the charges went off, the explosions lit up the sky like a second sunrise. Watched from a safe distance, his face calm. 3 down, he said into his communicator. Where do you need me next, Major? His voice came back immediately. They have a command post in the old government building. Take it out. On my way. On the other side of the city, Sergeant Han was having a very bad night. Her squad had been separated from the main force during an ambush. Now she was alone, defending the entrance to a hospital where 50 wounded and a dozen human medics were hiding. 40 soldiers were coming toward her position. She had 1 sidearm, 1 combat knife, and a rifle that had jammed 5 minutes ago. She threw the rifle aside. It was useless now. The first soldier came around the corner and shot him between the eyes. The second one followed immediately, and she shot him too. Then her sidearm ran dry. She drew her knife. They were large. They were strong. Each one had 4 arms and a mouth full of razor teeth, but had grown up in the mountains of. She had learned to hunt before she learned to read. She had killed her first wild boar when she was 12 years old. She was not afraid of monsters. The next 3 hours became a legend. Fought with her knife, with her fists, with rocks and broken pieces of metal. She fought until her arms were covered in blood, both hers and theirs. She fought until the sun began to rise over the burning city. When the relief squad finally reached her position, they found her sitting on the hospital steps, surrounded by 37 dead. She was still holding her knife. Sergeant, the squad leader said, staring at the bodies in disbelief, "Are you all right?" Looked up at him with tired eyes. "The civilians inside are safe," she said. "That is what matters." In orbit, Captain Park was fighting his own battle. The flagship was twice the size of the Indomitable. Its weapons were powerful enough to crack a planet, but had something that the commander did not have: patience. For hours he played a careful game. He would attack, then pull back. Attack, then pull back. Each time he drew the flagship a little further from the main fleet. Each time he made the enemy commander a little more angry, a little more reckless. "He is following us," Lieutenant reported. "He is leaving his support ships behind." Nodded. "Good. Signal the Hammer of Soul and the Eternal Dawn. Tell them to execute attack pattern 7. When the flagship realized the trap, it was too late. The Hammer of Soul hit it from the left. The Eternal Dawn hit it from the right. And the Indomitable hit it from below, directly in the engine core. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. War Commander died in that explosion. He never understood what had happened. He never understood how a species he had never heard of, from a planet on the edge of nowhere, had destroyed his fleet and ended his career. He died confused and angry, which was fitting. But the battle was not over yet. The remaining ships tried to retreat. They had seen enough. They wanted to escape, to spread the word about these dangerous humans, to warn others to stay away from their territory. Major had other plans. She commandeered a shuttle and flew it directly at the lead transport ship. This transport held 3,000 slaves, about to be taken off-world and sold. "Major, that is insane," said over the communicator. "You will never survive a boarding action alone." His response was calm. "I am not alone, Captain. I have 40 of my best soldiers with me, and those took children. I am going to get them back." She crashed the shuttle into the transport ship's docking bay. Before the dust had even settled, she was out the door, rifle blazing. Her soldiers followed. The battle inside the transport was brutal and bloody. The corridors were narrow, perfect for close combat, fought through them like a force of nature. Soldiers fell before her, one after another. When her rifle ran out of ammunition, she picked up a weapon and kept firing. When that ran out, she used her fists. An hour later, she reached the slave holds. 3,000 looked up at her with wide, terrified eyes. They had been chained to the walls like animals. They had been beaten. They had been starved. They had lost all hope. Looked at them, and for just a moment, her hard face softened. "My name is," she said in broken, the words learned hastily from a translator. "I am a soldier of Earth. I am here to take you home." A small child, no older than 5 or 6, reached out toward her with trembling hands, knelt down and took those tiny hands in her own blood-covered fingers. "It is over," she said softly. "You are safe now. The monsters cannot hurt you anymore." The child began to cry. Then others began to cry. Soon the entire slave hold was filled with the sound of weeping, but it was not the weeping of despair. It was the weeping of relief, the weeping of people who had expected to die and had instead been saved. Stood up and keyed her communicator. "Captain, the transport is secure. 3,000 civilians rescued, requesting medical teams immediately." His voice came back thick with emotion. "Well done, Major, well done." Above Prime, the last ships fled into the darkness of space. They would carry stories with them, stories of a species called humans, from a planet called Earth, creatures who came from nowhere and fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The Battle of Prime was over. The humans had won. The battle lasted 11 days. When it was finally over, the sky above Prime was quiet for the first time in almost a month. No more ships, no more explosions, no more screaming, just the soft purple clouds drifting across the horizon, the same way they had for thousands of years. But the world below those clouds had changed forever. The beautiful crystal cities were in ruins. Towers that had taken centuries to build lay shattered across the ground. Streets that had once been filled with music and laughter were now filled with rubble and ash. They would need years, perhaps decades, to rebuild what they had lost. But they were alive. That was what mattered. They were alive because strangers had come from across the galaxy to save them. Captain Park walked through the ruins of the capital city. His uniform was dirty and torn. He had not slept in 3 days. He had lost 17 soldiers in the battle. Each death weighed on him like a stone in his chest. He knew their names. He knew their faces. He would carry them with him for the rest of his life. Around him, human soldiers were working alongside survivors. They were clearing rubble. They were setting up medical stations. They were distributing food and water from the ship's supplies. No one had ordered them to do this. They simply did it because it needed to be done. Doctor and her medical team from the Mercy's Hand had set up a hospital in what used to be a concert hall. They worked around the clock, treating wounds and illnesses, saving lives that would have been lost without them. The doctors watched in amazement at human medical technology. It was so advanced, so effective, so different from their own gentle healing arts. Herself had not rested since arriving. Her hands were steady as she performed surgery after surgery, but her eyes were tired. One of her nurses tried to convince her to take a break. Later said, "There are still patients waiting. I will rest when they are all stable." That was the human way. Push forward, keep going, rest when the job is done. On the edge of the city, Chief Warrant Officer was helping to rebuild a school. He worked in silence, lifting heavy beams and carrying supplies, his strong hands doing work that usually required machines. A group of children watched him with wide eyes. They had never seen anyone so large do such gentle work. One of the children, a little boy with silver skin, walked up to and tugged on his sleeve. Looked down at him, his face softening. "Thank you," the child said in his high musical voice, "for saving us." Knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy. He did not smile often, but he smiled now. "You are welcome, little one. Take care of yourself. Grow up strong. Make this world beautiful again." The boy nodded seriously, as if he had been given a sacred mission. Then he ran off to join his friends and went back to work. Sergeant Han stood on a hill overlooking the city. She had 37 stitches in various parts of her body. She had been ordered to rest. She had ignored the order. She was too restless to sit still. Lieutenant found her there and stood beside her in silence for a while. "How are you feeling?" asked finally. Shrugged, "I have been worse." "You held that hospital alone against 40. That is going to become a legend, you know. They are already calling it the stand-of." Looked uncomfortable. She had never liked attention. "I was just doing my job. Anyone would have done the same." Shook her head. "No, not anyone. That is what makes you special." Did not respond. She just kept looking at the city below, watching the humans and working together among the ruins. It was a strange sight. Two species that had never met before, that came from worlds so different they might as well have been from separate universes, working side by side like they had known each other for years. Maybe that was what hope looked like. In the old temple district, grandmother sat in the gardens where she had played as a child. The gardens were damaged now, the beautiful flowers crushed and burned, but some plants had survived. Life always found a way. Captain found her there. He had been looking for her. There was something he needed to say. He approached slowly and sat down on a broken stone bench beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply sat in the quiet together, two old souls who had seen too much. Finally, turned to look at him. Her large eyes were filled with an emotion that could not quite identify. "Captain," she said softly, "I have lived for 112 years. I have studied the history of 1,000 civilizations. I thought I understood how the universe worked. I thought I knew that the strong take from the weak, that power is all that matters, that kindness is a luxury that only the safe can afford." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You have proven me wrong. You came from across the galaxy to help a species you had never met. You fought and died for people who had nothing to offer you. You, your own government, risked your own careers, sacrificed your own soldiers. And when I asked you why, do you remember what you said?" Nodded slowly. "I said we came because you asked, because someone had to." "Yes," his voice trembled slightly. "Because someone had to, such simple words, such a simple idea. And yet in all my years of study, in all the ancient texts and histories I have read, I have never seen any species actually live by that idea. Until now. Until you." She reached out and took his hand in her own thin fingers. Her grip was weak, but her touch was warm. "I do not know how to repay you," she said. "We have no weapons to offer. We have no wealth. We have only our art, our music, our poetry. We have only our gratitude." Squeezed her hand gently. "That is enough. That has always been enough. We did not come here for payment. We came here because it was the right thing to do." Smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. "Then let me give you something else. Let me give you a promise. That we'll never forget what you have done for us. We will tell this story to our children, and they will tell it to their children for as long as our species exists. The humans came. They came when no one else would. They came because someone had to." She looked up at the sky, where human ships still orbited, keeping watch over the wounded world. "And we will tell the galaxy. We will tell every species we meet. There is a world called Earth, far away on the edge of known space. The people there are strange. They come from a planet of violence and danger. They evolved by fighting everything that tried to kill them. They are strong and stubborn and sometimes frightening." Her smile grew wider. "But they are also kind. They are brave. They believe in protecting the weak, even when it costs them everything. And if you ever find yourself in trouble, if you ever face an enemy you cannot defeat, if you ever send a message into the darkness hoping that someone, anyone, will hear you and come to help." She looked back at, her eyes shining with tears. "Send that message toward Earth, because the humans will come, they will always come." Felt his own eyes growing wet. He was not an emotional man. He had trained himself to stay calm, to stay focused, to keep his feelings under control. But in this moment, sitting in a ruined garden with an old woman from a species he had not even known existed a month ago, he felt something break open inside him. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for believing in us." Laughed, a gentle sound like wind chimes. "No, Captain. Thank you for giving me something to believe in." They sat together in the garden as the sun set over Prime. Around them, the sounds of rebuilding continued. Hammers and voices and machines, the sounds of a world coming back to life. The humans would leave eventually. They had their own world to return to, their own lives to live. But they would leave behind more than just repaired buildings and medical supplies. They would leave behind a story, a legend, a promise. And across the galaxy, other species would hear that story. They would hear about the who answered a stranger's call. They would hear about the soldiers who fought and died for people they had never met. They would hear about Captain Park, who his own government because he could not ignore a mother's plea for her children. Some would not believe it. Some would think it was just a story, a fairy tale told to comfort the weak. But others would believe. Others would look toward that distant yellow star and wonder about the strange species that lived there. Others would remember in their darkest moments that somewhere in the vast and cold universe there were people who believed in helping strangers. And maybe, just maybe, those others would try to be a little more like the humans. Maybe that was the greatest gift of all.